Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. This is a Folio Society edition, so it comes with a slipcover. I'm sort of burying the lead here because the slipcover is printed on this side here. And the way that they've done this book is, so Pasternak's father, Leonid, was a famous artist in his own time, painter, and he had some drawing and pencil things. And they went through the father's entire sort of collection of art that he had created and pulled out those images that fit with the text. So it wasn't that they didn't commission an artist to, paint pictures or make drawings that went with the text. They, through the hundreds and hundreds of paintings and drawings that already existed from Pasternak's own father, they pulled out those that seemed to fit with the text. It's pretty interesting. At the same time, they did commission a new translation. And this translation was from an experienced translator, but he happened to be Pasternak's nephew. So we have, it's a really interesting way that they've gone about it. And by all accounts, that I haven't read this in several translations or anything. I can't compare it, but by all accounts, it's a pretty good translation. And what I have seen comparisons, where people will pull out passages and compare it to other ones. This one seems like a really good one. I always have a problem when people talk about translations and don't even talk about that translation. They say, oh, well, I didn't like this book, or I did like it, but they don't even talk about which translation they use. So this is important. All right. Let's have a look. So this is the slipcover. Another thing is that the book originally, of course, was in one volume, and the Folio Society has broken into 2 volumes. I'm a big fan of that. I love it when they do that. It just makes a big book easier to read when you can just take part of it. So let's have a look inside. The blue end leaves match the color of the slipcover. Of course, it's upside down. So the translator is Nicholas Pasternak Slater. The illustrations by his father, Leonid Pasternak. And the picture editor, who really matters here, she went through all the images and picked out the ones that go. This is the second volume. Let me look at the first because there's an introduction. Obviously, they're both upside down, so this is an amazing show of competence and skill on my part. So it's an introduction by Anne Pasternak Slater. So it's really a very family affair going on here. I don't know if you can tell in the images, or rather in the video, but the pages are very thick. So we have a book that is a pretty big book anyway, but then they split it into 2 to make it easier to read, but then they gave it this beautiful thick paper, which they could afford to do because it was in 2 volumes. I mean, afford not financially, but which they could do because it was in 2 volumes. If they kept it in 1 volume, I doubt that they would want to keep the paper as thick because it would make it even bigger than it already was. Let's have a look at some of the images. And I'll just say there are lots of them. There are lots of them sort of integrated throughout. And so some of them are very small, and then some of them get bigger. So here's a list of illustrations, just to give you an idea of how many we're talking about. That's a lot of illustrations. The second volume as much as the first. And it just jumps in at page 273. I always find it interesting when they do something like that. Anyway, let's have a look at the binding. Volume 1 is distinguished from Volume 2 by these little symbols here. So like all Folio Society, they're Smith sewn, which means they're sewn in together, they're not glued. You can open them without breaking the spine. So they really look unread. And then they're on acid-free paper. And just so thick. So I think it's a really beautifully done book. The thickness of the paper, the many illustrations, and the translation itself, I just think it's really well done. I think it's and it feels nice. The cloth, I should have mentioned the cloth binding here. It's got kind of a textured feel to it, but it feels soft. It's not a rough cloth. Okay, so there we have it, a Folio production of Boris Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago.